Hey, what's up, everybody? Garrett Rummel here with Duty to Train. Today, we're going to continue on with our Second Amendment research. This is where I do all of my sourcing, all of my research right in front of you. I don't do any of my research without doing it on my computer in front of you. And then that way, when hopefully Duty to Train takes off, becomes huge, I end up doing interviews and people, take issue with things that I say. I'll be able to say I've done all this research. It's all online and you can go watch it. And people can hopefully see that I'm being honest about the takes and the opinions that I form, the takes that I have and the opinions that I form, because they'll be able to see exactly why I formed my opinions. So I'm already super pro Second Amendment. I'm not hiding that. But yeah, let's just get into it. So I'm going to share my screen quick. And I wanted to start here. We left off with a Colin Noir video last time, but I'm going to pick up something because I want to I saw some video earlier and it's kind of like Second Amendment stuff, and so I want to be forthright with everybody and show you everything that I'm researching. Aha, this is it. All right. So apparently Matthew McConaughey.
Then just buying concealed carry insurance
isn't
enough to be prepared.
I'm a fan of Matthew McConaughey.
All right. So apparently Matthew McConaughey, ever since the Uvalde, Texas shooting, Matthew McConaughey is from Uvalde. And ever since then, he's kind of been trying to pass himself off or be the person. I don't want to say pass himself off because that's has a super negative connotation. But he's trying to be like the middle of the ground gun guy in America to bring people together and hopefully have some honest conversations. This guy, Colin Noir, super pro Second Amendment. I personally really like him. He's a lawyer. He's very intelligent. And because he's a lawyer, he knows a lot of the legal defense arguments when it comes to the Second Amendment. So we're just going to go through this interview and see, kind of what happens.
McConaughey as an actor. I've never met him, so I don't really have an opinion of him as a person. However, after the Uvalde shooting, Matthew McConaughey has taken on the mantle of being the reasonable voice. And
I think Brown shouldn't be the stick.
Matthew has to say, because a lot of it is honestly insidiously deceptive.
Shouldn't be this complicated.
You said something else at the White House. You said that the middle ground is where most Americans are on this issue, the guns issue. I think you're right, but I've also been following the gun issue for years after tragedy, and nothing gets done.
Understand that when he says nothing ever gets done, he means more gun control, specifically ban semi-automatic rifles, and some want to ban all semi-auto guns on top of that. Have a mandatory gun buyback of existing semi-auto rifles.
I think that's like fair to say, right? This says the guy does say nothing ever gets done. And Colin Noir's point, I watched this a little bit of this earlier, not the whole thing, but it's fair to say that there are tons of gun laws that get passed. Like the Supreme Court just came out and said that everybody can carry. And then as a response, tons of states came out and in a way to fight back are basically issuing those permits, but then making it illegal to take those permits anywhere. So to say that there is never any laws that get passed to try and curb this, I don't think that they're good laws. But to say that there's no laws, right? This guy, listen to what he says.
Auto control.
Done. Years after tragedy. Yeah.
And so he's been covering it for years. That's what this guy is saying. He's been covering it for years.
Nothing gets done.
And nothing ever gets done.
Understand that when he says nothing ever gets done, some want to ban all semi-auto guns on top of that. Have a mandatory gun buyback of existing semi-auto rifles or all semi-automatic guns. Ban all magazines that can carry more than 6 to 10 rounds. Be able to take someone's guns without due process. Create a national database of all guns and who owns them, which they call universal background checks. Be able to sue the gun manufacturers anytime a criminal uses one of their guns to commit a crime. There's more, but those are the main things they want done when they say nothing gets done.
Does freak out a lot of people that consider themselves strong Second Amendment.
Sure.
They think any measure is a measure towards confiscating all guns. So
I just want to point this back to back in Canada when Justin Trudeau said back in 2010 that they wouldn't ban firearms and then they just ban pistols. So this is not unprecedented. When people talk about that, it's not unprecedented. That just, let's give him his due, but they're making out to seem like, oh, it's crazy that, all these Second Amendment people, they think that, oh, any infringement. It's like, that's how politics is played. Everybody, can we just get over this hump? This is how politics is played. And there are some people, I do think, to give him his due, and before he starts talking, Matthew McConaughey does not want to ban all guns, right? He does not. But there are many people who do want to ban all guns, who would support Matthew McConaughey. And then once they realize, okay, he doesn't want to push any further, then they would push back against Matthew McConaughey, take all of the, the legal restrictions that he was able to put in place, and then say, okay, now let's go further, right? That's not like a conspiracy theory. That's not a fact, or that's not like a crazy idea, right? If you say you want to instill some type of permanent gun control, permanent gun ban, and you were in America, right? Say you were a politician in America and you wanted to ban all guns. Would you not support Matthew McConaughey and be like, okay, let's get everybody kind of on Matthew McConaughey's side, ban some guns, ban certain things that we wanted to do for a while, and we can use Matthew McConaughey as the spokesperson, and then we can work our agenda down the road. But right now we have to kind of get everybody on board. And in order to do that, Matthew McConaughey might be a good person to use. I don't think that's a crazy thing to think about, right? That's just common sense. If there are people like that who want to ban all guns, they would use somebody like Matthew McConaughey. And I'm not saying they'd be like pulling his strings. They would just support him and they would give him tons of money so that he could push this agenda. And then once he no longer was pushing the agenda they wanted, which is really, really extreme, once he was able to pass everything that he wanted to pass, and then he said, hey, okay, this is good, like we do need to have a Second Amendment, they would say, no. Now you're a waste. You're done, right? We don't support you anymore. Get rid of him. Who's the next guy?
Oh, how do you speak to those people? I think that's kind of what you were doing.
Well, one of the things, it was just one word.
Yeah.
I went in there and flipped, seemed to get those hard Second Amendment.
Any does freak out a lot of people that consider themselves strong Second Amendment.
Sure.
I just wanted to hear it from the beginning so that, again, we're hearing the whole thing.
I think any measure is a measure towards confiscating all guns. So how do you speak to those people? I think that's kind of what you were doing.
Well, one of the things, it was just one word.
Yeah.
I went in there and flipped, seemed to get those hard Second Amendment defenders' ears to at least listen. Yeah. And that was, I changed the word from control to responsibility.
Right. They hate gun control.
Well, control sounds like a mandate. Right. Nobody wants to mandate. No one wants to be controlled. But responsibility is still something that we can all go, yeah, I'll take responsibility.
Sorry, he's got to shave this beard. That's an atrocious. Just shave it, dude. What are you doing?
Ability, and a lot of the.
On a good note, his hair has been luscious since the day he was born.
The far right or the Republicans, they almost feel like responsibility is a value that they have ownership of, and it's a sense of almost pride and honor to be responsible. So when
he is right there, right? When I'm a conservative libertarian, but the idea of individual responsibility does ring true with many conservatives or people on the right, people who are like gun owners, which is why a lot of people who own guns, right? Because you're personally responsible for your own safety. So what he's talking about right here, I totally agree with.
Narrative got changed and the questions and started calling it gun responsibility. A lot more conversations I even noticed in the few days that we were there were able to be had from both sides, because the Second Amendment defenders could talk responsibility. They could look you in the eye and talk responsibility with someone from.
The caveat is, what does he mean by responsibility? Obviously, right? Just because you change what gun control, just because you change the control word doesn't mean you're changing what you're pushing, right? I don't have an issue with the word control. I have an issue with what gun control, that umbrella term, what it entails, right? Gun control is just two words. That doesn't really matter, right? What gun control entails is the issue.
On the other side of the aisle.
Changing gun control to gun responsibility is kind of like that meme I saw about Pizza Hut. You can put a cross on an old Pizza Hut building and call it a church. However, no matter what sign you put on that building, everyone still knows it used to be a Pizza Hut.
I haven't seen this part yet, so I just watched the beginning and then I knew that I was going to do this video. So I actually hadn't seen this when I said that.
And no matter what word you put after gun, it's still about more gun control. Besides, why should responsible gun owners be
that is fair, right? Because I mean, Matthew McConaughey is just being open. He's saying, hey, you know, words matter, and they do matter, right? The Republicans way back in the day, they changed, I think it was like, I don't know, after life tax or something like that. And then they changed it to death tax. And when you talk about after dying, you know, there's a tax on the money that you give to your heirs after you die. It's called a death tax. And people really don't like the idea of taxing dead people. And so both sides play this game, right? All Matthew McConaughey is saying is that we can kind of use a different word to get a little bit more people on board. Colin is saying it doesn't matter which word you use, you're still trying to push the same things.
Be held personally responsible for the actions of criminals. So what word you put after gun, it's still about more gun control. Besides, why should responsible gun owners be held personally responsible for the actions of criminals? So because a criminal uses a certain gun in a shooting, ban everyone from owning that gun. Because a criminal uses a magazine with more than 6 to 10 rounds, ban everyone from using those magazines. However, I don't see him telling the police to be personally responsible for the actions of criminals. Why not limit police to 6 to 10 rounds? Why not ban police from owning semi-auto rifles? You know why they don't do that? Because it's stupid. If gun control means holding everyone responsible for the actions of a few criminals, then gun control by its very nature will result in banning all guns, because criminals will always do criminal shit.
I mean, to like, to push back against that a little bit, why don't they push for that? Because it's easier, you know, somebody who is for more gun control, they would say, yeah, that's not a really good argument though, because like we're not pushing for that because it's easy to do tons of background checks, know people, you know, it's when you only give it to cops, then it's in far fewer hands. It's easier to control. When you give, you know, extended regular size magazines, like 15-round pistol magazines, 30-round rifle magazines, to everybody, then it becomes like harder to control. So that would be like the left's argument. But to his point, I don't know, I'll just say that.
Shit with
There's an argument to say that like, oh, why don't they say that for cops? That's just stupid. It's straw manning the argument, right? I'm not saying that I don't agree with it. I actually agree with what he's saying. Like it is stupid, but it's straw manning the argument to say that the only reason that they don't do it with cops, like there is a different reason why nobody is pushing for cops to have limited rounds, right? Because when you call the cops, you don't want, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, you don't want the cops to be limited in their firepower, right? Everybody kind of agrees on that. The difference is that when I want to protect myself, I also do not want to be limited with rounds. He's just making the point that it's stupid on both sides, and on that I agree. But yeah,
guns, because they're, wait for it, criminals. You can call it gun responsibility, gun accountability, or gun school for people who don't read good. In the end, you're still impeding on other people's ability to protect themselves because a criminal did some criminal shit. No, thank you. Just because you act good and throw around a couple of euphemisms, gun control, common
control anymore. It's
gun violence prevention.
For gun safety. They don't even call.
Still just gun control. The funny thing is, Matthew thinks he's doing something new. The gun control lobby stopped using the phrase gun control a long time ago. Now they call it common sense gun measures or common sense gun safety or gun violence prevention.
For gun safety. They don't even call it gun control anymore. It's gun safety. And now it's gun violence prevention. You know, it's you keep making it more obvious that it's something we should do.
Using soft words to get us to swallow poison is something they've been doing for decades.
Politicians are very, very good with their words. I just like to watch that one more time.
We should do.
Using soft,
making it more obvious that it's something we should do.
I don't know if I believe Nancy Pelosi's take on that, making it more obvious. She was being very particular with her words right there, right? You can fill that in how you want, but she was being very particular with her words.
Using soft words to get us to swallow poison is something they've been doing for decades. So you may be able to pull that gun responsibility crap with a bunch of old rhino FUD Republicans, but not with us. We've seen this playbook way too many times.
I mean, some of the issues that you specifically have talked about, universal background checks, raising the age for purchasing of assault rifles, national red flag law.
Assault rifles isn't a thing. I can assault anybody I want with any pistol that I have. Stupid.
Laws, a longer waiting period for assault weapons.
Yeah.
These are positions that have widespread approval among the American public.
80-something%, right?
I mean, if you look, there's Fox News.
See, this is where I believe I saw this. Let's go to. I'm trying to find, because I saw news articles back during COVID of people in California who wanted to purchase a pistol because everything was kind of getting crazy and people wanted a gun and they wanted it now. And I believe California farm waiting period. 10-day waiting period before a firearm can be released to a purchaser or transferee. I don't want to speak out of turn. The effects of waiting period. Okay, let's go to settings. Anytime. Let's do custom date range. Let's do, when did COVID start? So it started like March, April, so maybe like May. 5, 1. Can you believe it's been like over 3 years since COVID started? And then let's go through 5/1/2021. American Progress. I don't know. Okay, July 8th, 2020. The coronavirus crisis has led to a dangerous surge in gun sales. I don't know why that's dangerous, which has given new urgency to addressing the gaps in federal and state gun laws that allow unregulated access to firearms. Here we go. All right, American Progress. Let's see how stupid this article is, because that was a real dumb headline, right? They just said the coronavirus crisis led to a dangerous surge. Why when people buy guns, when the world seems to be going to hell in a handbasket, which it seemed to be in July 8th, 2020. Why is it bad for people? Why is it dangerous for people to own guns? Unregulated access. Okay. Almost immediately after governors began to issue orders in early March, directing non-essential businesses to close, new stores began to emerge of increased traffic at gun stores. One photo of a line of buyers outside of California gun shop is likely to become one of the most recognizable images from this moment in modern American history. Okay, so all these people, right, wanted guns, and they had to wait 10 days. So here's my point, is I remember a lot of people, not a lot of people, I just remember hearing news stories of people in California getting upset about the waiting period because they were going in and they didn't realize that they had to wait. But let's just finish this. Since this early reporting, data have confirmed dramatic increase in the number of guns purchased during its pandemic. Since these data have been tracked, April gun sales were nearly as high, just as the coronavirus has exposed gaps in the U.S. healthcare. Ownership of firearms. Far too many gun sales are allowed to proceed without background checks, and gun owners face. I don't know of any state. Let's look this up real quick. What states do not require background checks for gun purchase? Okay, not all states require background checks for all gun transfers, and not all background checks are equal. Deaths from guns, homicides, and suicides decline only when background checks are part of a purchaser licensing system. After Connecticut adopted its licensing law, it saw a 40% drop in gun homicides, 15% drop in gun suicides. In contrast, available research examining, I wonder what year this was, and if people just killed themselves in other ways, and if the homicide rate stayed the same, they just killed people in other ways. State background check laws generally fall into one of these categories. Okay, so if a potential buyer goes to purchase a handgun, here are the steps taken within each state's laws. Is a background check required for a transfer by a licensed dealer? Virginia, yes. Is a background check required for a private transfer? Okay, Virginia, no. Do you know what that means? Okay, if anyone doesn't know what that means, private transfer means it's between you and a friend or you and a family member, and you are personally and legally responsible for making sure that the person that you transfer that firearm to and give it to is legally allowed to possess a firearm. And I'm not just saying this, I would never, and I don't know anyone who would, I would never sell my firearm to any random person off the street. I'd be like, no, you can go buy a different one. I don't know you. I don't know if you're supposed to have guns. I don't want you doing something crazy with it. Is the purchaser required to get or provide a license? No. But it doesn't matter if you need a license if you get a background check. Are fingerprints required as part of the background check process? Virginia, no. What does this star mean? Virginia does not regulate private transfers. Okay. So fingerprints aren't required. Fingerprints. Trying to think, because I got a Maryland HQL. Yeah, I think actually my Maryland HQL did require fingerprints. Is the state required to check state mental health records and restraining order data as part of the background check? Okay, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. Okay, so really, I mean, the only difference is, is the state required to check state mental health records and restraining order data as part of the background check? This is something that I have to say, the reason that I'm not on board with the whole mental health check is, one, who's determining who is and is not mentally healthy? I feel like that is a slippery slope and a dangerous area to get into. There are obviously some people who are mentally unfit. I guess, sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. So this is why I'm doing this. I want people to see how I'm forming the thoughts in my head in real time. I don't think, obviously, that all people should own firearms, right? If you're a danger to yourself or others, then you shouldn't own a firearm. However, what is determined, or who determines who is mentally healthy? I don't want to go down this road. We can go down this road in different videos, but to my knowledge, in order to get like a judge to say that you're mentally incompetent to, you're not mentally competent enough to own a firearm, you have to be either put into like a penitentiary, or family members in some states are able to like go to a judge and say that you shouldn't have one. Okay, so just throwing this out there though. So is a background check required for a transfer by a licensed dealer? Now let's just look this up. Am I responsible for gun I transfer? And let's do Texas. Inheriting a gun. Can I gift a gun? This video or an article describe the federal and state laws that apply when giving a firearm as a gift. To a minor, do I need to transfer the registration of a firearm from one person to this? Okay, that doesn't do very well. Okay. Texas currently has more than 1 million residents who are active holders of concealed handgun permits. Though our state's constitution guarantees every Texan the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or the state, ever-changing laws and regulations make it difficult to understand exactly how to legally buy and sell firearms. who you can and can't sell to. Texas residents must be at least 18 years old to purchase rifles, shotguns, and ammunitions, and residents must be 21 years old to purchase a handgun. I believe that's universal. Texas law section, whatever, the unlawful transfer of certain weapons outlines restrictions regarding the private sales of guns and weapons. It states that a person commits an offense if they knowingly sell to a person who intends to use the weapon unlawfully, knowingly sells to a person younger than 18 years old, knowingly sells to a person who is intoxicated, knowingly sells to a person who cannot legally own a firearm. For example, those with felony conviction cannot own a firearm until 5 years after their release from jail or supervised release. Do I need to run a background check? No. Keeping a record of the sale. Okay, now let's just look up this. What if I sell my firearm to a felon in Texas? The Texas unlawful transfer of certain weapons offense prohibits selling or giving away a handgun to someone who you know is going to use it illegal. It also punishment. A conviction is punished as a Class A misdemeanor unless you are convicted under A2 for giving a handgun to a child, in which case the punishment is at the state jail felony level. What if the parents consented to the sale? Okay, so how can I be charged? Okay, a conviction unless you're under A2. Okay, sells, rents to be unlawfully. Okay, if you know that the person, okay, so I would be open to this. If you know that the person to whom the handgun is being delivered is going to be committing some type of illegal offense, especially if they're going to be like harming somebody else, I would be down to make that a bigger, what is a Class A misdemeanor? Class A misdemeanor in Texas. Punishable by up to 1 year in jail, a fine of up to $4,000, or both jail time and a fine. Okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you know that somebody's going to do something egregious with your firearm and you sell it to them anyway, I would be, I mean, laws basically, like, what are laws? Laws are basically just a general understanding between citizens that this is the way that we want to live. I do not want somebody who, like, I am down for no background checks privately, right? But in order to do that, we have to make sure that there are harsh punishments for giving your firearm to somebody who does not treat it responsibly, or someone who is going to commit like some type of offense. Actually, I would take away treat responsibly. However, you shouldn't, I think, give someone a pistol unless they do know how to handle it responsibly. I think as gun owners, we have a responsibility to know what we're doing. And if someone you know has no idea how to handle a weapon, and say they have a family and they're like, hey, I just want to have a gun, and you're like, okay, do you know how to use it? And they're like, no, I personally wouldn't sell them a gun until I knew how they could use it. So, okay, this is kind of like getting into a lot, but okay, going back to this guy says,
Just Paul, just for assault weapon flag law, raising the age, some of the issues that you specifically have talked about, universal background checks, raising the age for purchasing of assault rifles, national red flag laws, a longer waiting period for assault weapons.
Yeah.
So a longer waiting period, like what is that? Right, California has like 10 days. Maryland has 7. Like, do you want people to wait 30 days? You know, and the thing is you have to take these like down, you know, like years and years and years. If it's 30 days, why can't it be 60? And if it's 60, why can't it be 120? If it's 120, why can't it be 6 months? If it's 6 months, why can't it be a year? Right? These are just like stepping stones to make it harder for people to get these. I don't personally think that Matthew McConaughey wants anybody to have an AR-15, you know? I think that if you run a background check and you haven't committed any crimes, there's no reason for someone to tell you you can't exercise your own personal right.
These are positions that have widespread approval.
Yeah.
And then another, again, universal background checks. This is, I think, made intentionally vague. This is the reason I wanted to do the research on it real quick. When it comes to private transfer in states like Texas, I know it's also legal in Minnesota. You can do that without a background check, but you are legally liable for what that person does with that firearm. Now, I would be open to increasing some of the consequences or the legal ramifications or the legal consequences of selling your firearm to someone who you know, like in Texas, the only way it can go to a felony is if you sell it to a child. Like if you know somebody's going to go commit some type of mass felony, I guess, maybe that would be different, but it seemed like from that law that you'd only be liable for up to like a Class A misdemeanor. I would be open to enhancing that, but I think I should be able to sell my firearm to someone I know is responsible. Like I have a neighbor here, and if he wanted to purchase my firearm, I've gone shooting with him a ton of times. If I had one and he had one and we wanted to just trade, I don't see why the state needs to get involved. I'm a responsible person. I drive a 2-ton vehicle at 90 miles an hour, I guess not 90 miles an hour, but like 75, 80 miles an hour on the reg. And lots of people get into tons of car accidents, and I could literally harm tons of people at any given point in time. But I'm trusted to do that because I'm a responsible person. I haven't done anything to have that right taken away. If I haven't done anything to have my right as a gun owner taken away, I should be able to sell and buy any gun that I want to somebody that I know. I guess when it comes to, when it comes to background checks, that's something I'm gonna have to think about because like my gut says no, but like you don't want random people just going into gun stores and buying guns, obviously. Right. So some type of background check, I guess, would make sense. But then I would like the idea of then having private transfers, because then that it makes one side happy, because in order to get the guns out there, you have to do a background check. And then once they're out there, then gun owners just get to like swap them all around. Right. So if the cops ever come to your door, one of the big issues that people have with background checks is then the state knows where all the guns are. And if they ever wanted to go and confiscate them, they just show up at your door and say, hey, you own all these guns. This could happen in Maryland because I have to do background checks. They know everything that I own. And so if they wanted to confiscate guns, they would know, me and my neighbor have a ton of guns. But if I could say, I only own 3 when I really own 6, and they don't know that because I could just say, hey, I did a bunch of private transfers. I feel like that would make the left happy, and it would also make the right happy, because the government wouldn't be able to tell you, no, we know you own these guns. Be like, no, I sold them. Be like, to who? Be like, that's none of your, I guess that would be the one caveat, is you would not be required by law to ever give over that information of who you sold it to. But then, I guess, I don't know, maybe that would be like a good in between.
Among the American public.
87%, right?
I mean, if you look, there's a Fox News poll just earlier this year. Universal background checks, 87%.
Yeah. Universal background checks are a thing. That's what I'm saying. They are a thing. This is stupid.
Allowing police to take away guns from people who have been shown to be a threat.
And actually, real quick, because I just need to write down. Let's see. 8.1. Background checks are universal publicly.
80%, raising the minimum wage, 81%, waiting period, 70. I mean, it's very rare you see any political issues with that much agreement, and yet none of those things have been done.
The thing when it comes to ARs, though, people are like, oh, we have to raise the age of, to purchase assault rifle to, I don't know, 30 or whatever they want to raise it to. There is no difference between an assault rifle, of which people speak normally, and very many semi-automatic rifles, right? Lots of semi-automatic rifles have 10, 15, 20 round magazines. And it's the exact same thing. All the semi-automatic does is every time you pull the trigger, it just fires another round. You don't have to cock it. You don't have to do anything with it, right? You just keep pulling the trigger and it keeps firing. It doesn't matter what your gun looks like. If you have 20 rounds of 223 in a semi-automatic firearm, you have 20 rounds of 223 in a semi-automatic firearm. It doesn't matter if it's an AR or if it's some, Ruger or like, it just doesn't matter.
It's an interesting stat about the populace, almost near unanimous. I mean, the populace vote is there, and how.
So I know I'm just talking a whole lot, but one of the things, I think these are like intentionally vague. If you ask people like, hey, are you in favor of universal background checks? Most people would say yes, right? But also universal background checks are a thing. If you told people in America, do you realize that in every single gun store in America, you have to run a background check? Are you aware of that? People would probably say no, right? Or, or you could do like one of those late night show things and say, hey, not every gun in America requires a background check. Like, are you for universal background checks? And people would be like, yes, absolutely. But then there's probably a large percentage of the population where if you explain it out and say, hey, if you own a gun and you wanted to pass it down to your child, do you think that your child should have to get a background check? A lot of people would probably then say no. Right. But in terms of universal background check, the way that they're discussing it, they're saying that you should. You can't pass on your gun to your child without then doing a background check on your child. That would be stupid.
Do the sides and the contingencies they're bunkered into their sides on this? And I don't know how the law works, but that was a question I had. Well, wait, can there be a populist vote on this, an uprising that says, look, you're not representing the masses. The law is not representing the masses. That math, you may know more about this than I do. That math should add up. And right now it doesn't.
I honestly, I hate these stupid polls because they're so misleading. And you realize how misleading they are when you look at how the polls are conducted. If you read Fox News's poll methodology, it says Fox News polls includes interviews with a nationally representative sample of approximately 1,000 registered voters who were randomly selected from a national voter file and spoke live with interviewers on both landlines and cell phones. I understand it's virtually impossible to ask everyone in the country their opinion, but 1,000 people out of the 300 million people we have in this country is borderline comical. So I
would disagree with that. I mean, that's how you statistically if you can't argue, I mean, 1,000 people is a pretty good sample size, just like statistically speaking. I mean, you could do like 10,000 or whatever, but I don't know, to carry his argument to a little bit more of an extreme, if you did 10,000 people, would that be less comical? 1,000 person sample size is pretty good. And I just feel like the way that these questions are asked in the polls is the issue. It's not really the sample size itself. It's the way the questions are asked. Just like, do you support universal background checks? The vast majority of people would say yes. If you then told them that, all public transfers of firearms, like when you go to purchase a gun at a store, they do require a background check. Did you know that? Vast majority of people would probably say no. And then do you think that, your son should be required to have a background check when you sell him your firearm or when he buys it or gets it after you die? A lot of people would probably then say no. So I think that it's more the polls themselves that are flawed, and they ask stupid questions like, do you support universal background checks? And everyone's like, yeah, totally, rather than really breaking it down and delving into the depths. Because it's like, that's probably more the issue with polling. And I just took like a real basic polling class or statistics class in college. And the way that you formulate polling questions can really sway like your takeaway from a poll. And it's really problematic when you're like, especially if you're a company, like say you're Apple, right? And you're trying to create the best product and you're trying to figure out exactly what people want. Like if you ask the wrong questions, you could literally create an entire product and people don't even want it because you asked the wrong questions, right? But in the same way, I mean, politicians aren't stupid. They have really, really smart people working for them. Maybe politicians are stupid, but they're able to ask questions to get the answers that they want and ask confusing questions to get answers that they want. So I don't think it's so much an issue with the sample size as it is with the questions themselves.
I don't give these polls very much weight. However, what I do is use common sense. Politicians only do what keeps them in office. If 80% or more of the country truly agreed with these measures, they would have been done already. The reasons they have not been done is clearly because the majority of the country doesn't agree with these measures. Sure, they'll try to blame the spooky gun lobby, but the gun lobby is nothing more than a collection of different groups that receive money by way of donation.
I wouldn't totally agree with that either. In my opinion, the vast majority, and this has recently come up, but the vast majority of people in two areas really support two things that have nothing to do with guns. One, age and term limits when it comes to holding office in America. There is a huge swath of Americans, in my opinion, that are sick and tired of Biden, Schumer, Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, even Donald Trump. I mean, 78 years old. Like, guys, stop it. And so many people feel that way, but for whatever reason, these laws aren't getting passed. And then another one is insider trading, right? There's like rampant, like crazy evidence that all senators basically insider trade and nothing ever gets done. There's no laws that forbid it. I mean, they're just able to get away with all this crazy stuff. And actually, Nancy Pelosi was asked, this was like, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. I would like pull up the video, but it doesn't have to do with gun stuff. And she basically said, we should be able to, trade stocks like everybody else. And then on the other side, Dan Crenshaw, I think he was like a Navy SEAL or whatever. He's the senator with the eye patch. And I actually used to be a pretty big fan of his, but I listened to a podcast and he was basically asked, like there's, you beat Nancy Pelosi. And like, if you're kind of in like the Twitter, like finance world sphere, which I watch a lot of finance stuff when it comes to, and I watch a lot of people like on YouTube and Twitter that's kind of like independent finance channels. And a lot of them make fun of the fact that Nancy Pelosi is a better stock trader than Warren Buffett and George Soros, right? How is that possible? She knows nothing about trading stocks. It's possible because she has all this insider information, obviously, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But then Dan Crenshaw beat her one year. And you don't beat the best traders in the world without insider knowledge, especially when you're a senator, right? Maybe you get lucky, right? But Dan Crenshaw didn't get lucky. And he got asked a question about it on the podcast. And his answer was something crazy. And you can look it up, look up like Dan Crenshaw podcast, whatever, insider trading, and it'll pop up. And he basically totally justifies the fact that senators don't get paid enough. And so they have to basically make money elsewhere. And so if they have to basically insider trade a little bit, then that's, I guess, the result of, whatever. I might be misquoting him a little bit, but I mean, it was a dreadful answer. And so, yeah, I used to be a fan of his, but he obviously, just got bought out. And now he's willing to, break the law and hold other people accountable. And he passes tons of laws, but then, insider trading is illegal and then he does it. So I'm just like sick and tired of stuff like that. And I frankly think that tons of people are sick and tired of old people running for office and insider trading. But those are two things that in politics, for whatever reason, politicians just don't want to change those laws. And so when it comes to Colin's argument that if 80% of America agrees on something, they're going to get it passed, I would agree with him for the most part. But then there's like certain reasons why they don't want things to happen. I guess the difference between those two arguments and this one is those help make them tons and tons of money and gives them lots of power, right? It just personally helps them. I'm just like, I'm trying to like pick apart his argument, like Colin's argument, just to like get to the logical conclusion of like, okay, if we really pick apart his argument, because on its face, his argument didn't hold water. But then if you go underneath, you dive down one layer, right? Like, do they always pass things that the majority of people wanted the vast majority of time? No, there's some really big issues like term limits and insider trading that they don't pass. But why don't they pass that? Because it helps them individually, but they all have armed security. So I feel like Colin is right in that if the vast majority of people did want some type of gun control legislation passed, like universal background checks or whatever they were talking about, they would pass that because they don't care. They have private security. They have like the money to pay for, whatever lawyers they need to get whatever licenses they want to get. And I feel like that makes sense. I was just kind of like working that out in my head, but to reiterate, politicians don't always pass what the people want to pass. But when it comes to guns, because it's not helping them personally to keep Second Amendment rights around. The only reason for that is because it's not as prevalent of, or it's not as popular an opinion as people are saying, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
From gun owners so that they can fight against overreaching gun been done is clearly because the majority of the country doesn't agree with these measures. Sure, they'll try to blame the spooky gun lobby, but the gun lobby is nothing more than a collection of different groups that receive money by way of donations from gun owners so that they can fight against overreaching gun control laws. Whereas with the gun control lobby, also has the same thing, but on top of that, they have the mainstream medias and a bunch of billionaires who can back them financially with their own agendas. So this means the vast majority of people don't agree with these measures, because if they did, scores of people wouldn't be donating money to 2A groups to fight these very measures.
Yes, you mentioned one thing, get rid of the word gun control.
Right.
But even without that, do you have any advice on how they can speak?
Quit patronizing. There's a whole lot of Americans that need you to at least meet them where they are and what their understanding and how they've grown up on this issue with guns in their lives, and how most of them do handle them responsibly.
Touche, dude. Touche. This is one of like the big frustrating things is people are like, oh, we need to take away guns, and they don't know anything about them. They know nothing about guns. You know, they don't even know like the very big. And the thing is like, you don't have to be a pro, right? You just have to be informed, right? I'm not saying that you have to be the great shooter in order to enter the gun control debate. And anyone can enter the gun control debate, but don't expect people to take you seriously if you literally make like super dumb mistakes about like basic concepts.
So don't cast them down as being archaic or cavemen and women. And how could you? No.
Yeah.
Listen to them for a minute. And when you're coming in hot, which sometimes the left does on this issue and many others.
Sometimes, well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is immediately saying, you idiot, you dumbass. What? How foolish. You've lost them. You've lost them. They get more defensive. All right. So come in and meet them where they are and try to hear where they're coming from first, and understand that they have a.
I'd be super interested in having a conversation with Matthew McConaughey, because he sounds like he would be willing to have a conversation. I'm just wondering if he would also be willing to listen, because he says like first, like listen to them first and then say what you really want to say, which sounds like what he's actually saying. But I wonder if like you sat down, like if he had a conversation with Colin, right, and really sat down, was like, hey, this is, I got some great points here. Like, what do you think?
Viable stance, a viable position they're taking.
I wonder if he would then change his position.
But they didn't just come up with last night.
I've heard you say that we're not as deeply divided as we're told we are.
No.
Really?
Look at the percentages we just talked about.
Yeah.
86%. No, but the two I was talking with my wife about this yesterday. It's human nature. You don't slow down to 35 miles an hour on the interstate because everyone's looking at the daisies and the rainbow in the field to the right. No, you slow down to 35 on the interstate going northbound because everyone's slowing down to look at the car wreck on the southbound traffic on the other side. Right. We love the wreck.
Yeah.
We love it's entertainment. We don't put our finger on. We don't love to watch health as much as we like to watch disease. These two extremes have the microphone.
Yeah.
It's more entertaining. Trump's been great at selling fear. Fear sells more than hope.
Could you see yourself running?
I just take a huge issue with that. I mean, the fact that Biden hasn't sold fear, he has literally grouped all Republicans in with like this super crazy right-wing extremist group. So, does Trump sell fear? Oh, yeah. But I think that Matthew McConaughey right there is being super disingenuous if he's saying that Trump is the only one that sells fear. That
or something.
Maybe this has been like quick cut, and so I'm not giving him his due. That clearly was a cut right there, so maybe I'm not giving him his due.
Could I see it's more of a larger question from hope.
Could you see yourself running for something?
Could I see it's more of a larger question for me of is politics the category where I can be the most useful?
I want to believe what he's saying so bad, but I have to call bullshit. I call bullshit because the gun community is more than willing to have that conversation, but you all never want to. I mean, you say you want to, you talk about we need to meet them where they are and listen to them. But even now, you're on ABC News, a left-leaning mainstream media platform that is predominantly pro-gun control. You aren't doing interviews with people in the actual gun community. When have you sat down and had a conversation with the biggest voices in the gun community? You haven't. Hell, David Hogg is one of the most visible gun control activists in the country, and he backed out of a debate when he found out it was going to be with me. You're only listening to push gun control. I hear you, but how about gun control? I feel you, but how about gun control?
That's what I was saying. It sounds like he's saying, listen to them and then tell them what you want to say, right? He's kind of getting the same vibe.
Never has any one of you said, okay, how do we keep schools safe while still protecting people's 2A rights? No, it's you either vote with us on this issue or you hate children and want them all to die. Oh, you care about your guns more than you care about saving lives. Never once stopping to think, well, maybe these people want these guns because they see them as a better way to protect the things that they love and care for. You don't know this or ask this because you don't care. Never do you say, okay, let's try working with mental health organizations like Walk the Talk America, who is legitimately trying to find ways to improve mental health in this country while respecting and protecting people's 2A rights. You all never do this. It's always do what we want you to do or you want dead babies. So as likable as Matthew is, I call.
That's true. The way the mainstream media spins this is if you don't want to do this, it just must be because you don't care. So, I mean, he is dead on when he talks about that.
Bullshit on the whole meet them where they are because y'all never do it. You only go on left-leaning pro-gun control platforms and at best maybe talk to a few rhino FUD Republicans who could care less about the Second Amendment and would as soon as vote for gun control if they could get away with it. So until you start actually speaking with the gun community, you're just acting. I'm not saying Matthew doesn't care about saving us and
Okay.
Exam topics.
Exam topics.
Exam topics.
All right, let's stop share. Okay. So I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Maybe I'll get a little bit faster at like running through these, but I feel like the whole point is for me to sit there and like pick it apart, you know, like I want it to be entertaining, and I don't know, maybe people will appreciate my input and my feedback and my analysis. But you know, when people just say all of these different things, that requires like breaking stuff down. Like when they're talking about like background checks, when he's talking, you know, like all these different types of issues, it requires like research to make sure that like everybody's being honest, and it requires like thinking like out loud and being like, okay, is this true? And then when Colin was talking, I honestly, I was like, yeah, but that's not always, you know, just to reiterate, just to hopefully like make sure that I'm clear on this. When Colin was saying that if, you know, politicians always do stuff to help them like stay in office. True. But there are some things, you know, the vast majority of things, that's like what people vote on, right? So they can sneak through different stuff that they want to make sure continues, even though the majority of Americans don't want it to continue. They can kind of sneak stuff in as long as they're all staying in their partisan aisles, staying on their partisan sides, but then they can agree on these different things that help all of them together, right? Like we can all insider trade, we can all stay in as long as we want, but let's just go to our different sides on all these other issues, and then we'll pretend like we're fighting the good fight. And that way it keeps our constituents happy. But when it comes to, yeah, I'm like so up in my head about that thought right now. I just don't even think I'm like explaining it well anymore. I do agree with Colin that if the majority of Americans wanted universal background checks, they would pass it. But I think that every single conservative who owns a gun, or every single liberal who owns a gun, like they all go into a gun store, and every single time they purchase a gun, they have to do a background check. So when a lot of people probably get polled and they say, hey, do you want universal background checks? One, I think a lot of conservatives are like, what does that really mean? I don't know. It's just, they're all like real loaded questions. And yeah, so I'm like all up in my head right now because I was like trying to explain that. I don't know why my brain's like running a little bit slow today. So my sister-in-law is in labor right now, which is wild. So she's having a little boy, which is exciting. That was the text message. She hasn't given birth yet, but it was just a response to a group family message. But anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. Until Thursday, and we get into some stuff more again. Stay safe, live free, and I'll talk to you later. See you.